Hi, it's Jen. I'm just going to do a quick October reading wrap-up. I'm going to do you a favor. I'm just going to wrap up the books I still have the physical copies of. I read a lot of ebooks this month. I read some fun juvenile picture book arcs, but they were in digital format. So if you're interested in any of those, just go ahead, check my Goodreads. I review everything I read now. So if you're interested in what I thought of anything else, go ahead and check it out there. That way this video doesn't turn into some 30-minute video that nobody is going to sit through, you know? Alright. Finale by Stephanie Garber. I read the first book probably a month or two after it came out. Read the second book probably a month or two after it came out. And now I've been waiting on the third book forever, and I'm not sure why I waited so long. I was really worried that something silly would happen, like they go ahead and start taking it from a third character's perspective or something like that. And so I was kind of worried that they'd ruin the ending of this series. I don't know why I was worried about that. So I didn't want to read it because I enjoyed the second book a lot. The first book I didn't enjoy as much. Scarlett's character kind of grated on me. She's very indecisive. I mean, it's for a good reason, but still, I'm a very decisive person, and so sometimes I found Scarlett frustrating, but I really liked Donatella quite a bit. I could totally understand where Donatella was coming from. But this was actually decent. If you liked the first one, you're probably going to enjoy this one too. It is a lot like the other ones. There's a lot of metaphor. It's very descriptive. So if that's not your thing, you're still not going to like it. This one is fairly balanced between the two sisters. You don't get a whole bunch of one and not the other. It's fairly even. If anything, maybe a little bit more Donatella than Scarlett, but still marginally so. So I recommend it if you liked the other two, then you'll enjoy this one as well. I will say it was kind of hard to get back into it because it's probably been at least a year since I read the second one. And with that gap in time, it was very hard to get back into the style of this one. So if you haven't read the series, I suggest just reading the three of them just back to back. Because once you're accustomed to the writing style again, then it reads very easily, but it takes you probably, I want to say it took me 50 pages to enjoy the writing style again. So, this one's getting unhauled. I just rescued it from the bag just so I could review it. It was a delete, and it was on the free pile at my local library. And I liked the sound of the premise of the book, which is that the school football hero has been suspended for writing an unfavorable book report on old Shep, my pal, and he's upset because the dog dies at the end. So this sounded like a wonderful premise, because I read a lot of dog books growing up, and there's no such thing as a dog book that doesn't end with the dog dying, you know? They kill the dog at the end of all the dog books. So, so I liked the premise. Now, the actual execution, it doesn't really feel like it's as much about this as it is about his relationship with other football players, his relationship with the drama club, and so on, which wasn't what I was here for. It was decent, you know, it was decent. A little bit dated, because one of the students is writing letters to, oh goodness, what was the name of the movie star? Seriously, now I can't remember. Anyways, that kind of dated it, along with some of the other references, and it wasn't as much on this topic as I hoped it would be, so, oh well, you win some, you lose some, it was free. I probably wouldn't go out of my way to buy a different copy of it. I'm good. The next one I read was The Roundhouse by Louise Erdrich. I can never remember how to pronounce her name. I feel bad about that because I've read several of her books, but I'm always bad with pronunciation. So this book, I don't know where to start with this book. So this book is an excellent book. It's an excellent book. It's a deeply unpleasant book. It could be worse, though. What saves this book from being so horrible you can't read it is that it's from the perspective of a 13-year-old boy. Okay, so you don't get as much detail about the crime that happened, because that's what this is about. This is about a horrible crime that happens, and there's a problem prosecuting it because of how the jurisdictions work with reservations and owned land and so on, and so that's interesting. I definitely really recommend it, okay? But it's going to be an uncomfortable read pretty much throughout, which is probably, sometimes you need one of those. I think I gave this 4 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. It's not super, super graphic, but it's definitely got a lot of sexual content. But yeah, I mean, it's The Roundhouse. It was a National Book Award winner. You should probably read it. You're probably going to feel uncomfortable the whole time, but that's okay. It had all the components that make an excellent novel. It was suspenseful. It got to you emotionally, So I definitely recommend it. Let's see. Frankly in Love. Okay. So I got this book confused with another book. For whatever reason, I'm not sure why, I thought this was a Frankenstein retelling. Because Frank... And there must be a juvenile fiction book out that has a similar title that is a Frankenstein retelling. So, and I don't like to read about the books at all. Like, I don't read the blurbs and so forth. I just go into them blind, okay? So I'm reading this and I'm like, oh no, this is not a Frankenstein retelling. This is... not at all that. But you know what? I enjoyed it a lot. It blindsided me because, of course, I'm an idiot and I can't keep my title straight. But I'm glad because I wouldn't have picked it up. I picked it up because I'm like, oh, okay, that's the right time of year for this. But, yeah. And also, those pages, though. So I checked it out from the library because my Books A Million locally has a beautiful signed copy of this, and I love everything about the design of this book. This book design is what every author dreams of when they submit their book. I'm sorry, this is gorgeous. This is the dream right here. It's a gorgeous book. So it blindsided me. So it took me a little while to get on an even keel kind of with this book. But afterwards, I really enjoyed it because it's just, I had friends who were Korean growing up, and their parents were definitely not far off from these parents. They invited us over for dinner. We were friends, but they would have been furious at the idea of someone who was not Korean dating one of their kids. So I get it. I get it. So, how to describe it? There are some things in this that are going to really bother you. Okay, so Frank's a teenage boy, all right? And that's just not picking on boys. Let me rephrase that. Frank's a teenager, okay? And so Frank is not good at honesty yet, Frank isn't good at honesty yet. And that's where Frank screws up in this, because he is not good at honesty yet. And so instead of telling this girlfriend that he has about his parents' expectations for him, he just kind of hides it, and he does his best hiding it. And of course it backfires epically, as it's going to do. But Frank matures throughout this, He matures throughout this, he grows as a person. And the whole thing is very believable. All the experiences are believable. The whole thing is just, it was just really excellent. It really was. It was a great point of view. I mean, I had very strict parents growing up. And I had, who didn't like sometimes the people I was dating. I'm sure everyone can relate to that. Everyone's had that person they're dating that their parents don't approve of. So a lot of this in this story, you're going to relate to, even not being Korean. You're still going to find something in this that you relate to. So yes, I definitely recommend it. I don't know if I need the signed copy. I'm waiting to see if this lingers with me, if I'm still thinking about this a month from now. but I still thought it was good. It's kind of like a 3.5 star for me. It's billed as a romantic book. I found that out after the fact. It's billed as a romance. I didn't feel like it was a romance, to be honest. There are some romantic elements, but it's not a romance. So if you don't, I don't really like romances. That's not really what this is. This is more about family and coping with family, and it's more that than it is romance. Though there are some romance elements, but still. So yeah, even if you don't like romance, you could probably safely give this one a try, because while it's a part of it, and even a decent sized part, it's not all of it. So, yeah. With the Fire on High by Elizabeth Acevedo. Crap. And I practiced this, okay? Oh well. This poor book. Okay, so I loved Poet X. I read Poet X in like a single day. And then this poor book and me, we just had such bad luck. I kept checking it out as an online ebook and then forgetting about it because, for whatever reason, my library only had it available on a platform called Access 360. And I usually use the platform Overdrive. So basically, I kept forgetting that I had this book. And then I'd remember and it'd return itself. So I would read this book, sit and read, 50 pages, and then forget about it and it'd return itself. So I finally just got the physical copy. It was time to drive to the library and get the physical copy. This is a good book, okay? I liked Poet X better. Except Poet X, and the ending of Poet X is not as good as the ending of this one. The only thing I didn't like about Poet X is just suddenly everything's magically resolved at the end. Like, when does that happen, ever, in real life? Because this is, slice of life, relationships. What happened in that book, I mean, it shouldn't have just been magically all better at the end, right? It just shouldn't have been. If you read it, you know what I'm talking about. With the Fire on High doesn't do that, thankfully. With the Fire on High ends and leaves some things up in the air, Which is how real life is. Real life's always up in the air, You finish one problem, but then, there's different ones, it's up in the air, and I don't know. I really did enjoy this, and the ending is better than Poet X. So if you didn't read this one because you didn't like the ending of that one, this one ends in a way that makes more sense. So yeah, especially, I'm not really into cooking, at all. And I still enjoy this. If you're even sort of one of those people who watches cooking shows and so on, you're going to enjoy this even more. As someone who doesn't care about that at all, I still enjoyed this. If you haven't read one of her books before, I still would start with Poet X, because Poet X is just really strong, really powerful. I would start with Poet X. This is still excellent, but if you've never read one of hers, I'd still go Poet X first. Testaments by Margaret Atwood. I don't know why I waited so long to read this. So, before the show happened on Hulu, I stumbled across Handmaid's Tale. What was it? Maybe 5, 6, 7 years ago? I don't know. And I was just, I guess, totally mind blown. Loved Handmaid's Tale. It was just, I tried to talk everybody into reading it. It was like that. It's like, everybody must read this book. And I listened to the audiobook as well. I think Claire Danes reads it, and that is an excellent audiobook. It's an amazing audiobook. So I didn't want to read this one because I did not want it to ruin, just I didn't want it to ruin the first one for me, because the first one, is probably one of my favorite books ever. And I didn't want this to sully my memory of the first one. That being said, I love the choices that Atwood made in this book. I love the characters she chose to follow. I think those were excellent choices. Is this as good as the original? Of course not. How could anything be? I mean, the original was just, like, shocking and jaw-dropping, and, it was just crazy, okay? So this one couldn't quite do that, because the element of surprise is gone, right? And that's what is so hard for sequels, because that whole element of surprise, that what's around the corner, is kind of gone. But it was still really good. I don't think it could have been handled any better. I was reading it going, yeah, I have no complaints about this. But it's not quite as good as the first one, because it just can't be. I mean, it can't be. But still, if you loved the first one, this one is not going to ruin the first one for you. It's not going to, it's not going to make you go, oh, I like this one better. I mean, that's not going to happen, but it resolves so much from the first one without really, goodness, how to word it? Without really, I don't know, detracting from the first one, I guess, without, it leaves mystery in the first one. It leaves you with still some mystery from the first one. Still some things not resolved. It doesn't tie up all the ends in a pretty bow. It leaves it leaves a chunk of it the way it left it in the first one. It leaves a big chunk of it alone. And it still has the same kind of mystery going on at the end. You still don't know the whole story. You still don't know everything. But it's another chunk of the story that now you do know. And so I recommend it. I recommend it. It's for anyone who hasn't already read it. I'm sure everyone else has already read this. But yeah. So I'm going to go ahead and stop there, because that's enough books. And like I said, I read a whole bunch of ebooks too. If you're curious what I read, you can go ahead and check it out on Goodreads. But 17 minutes is long enough for an October wrap-up video. Hopefully I didn't drone on too long. But yeah. In another couple days I'm going to do a video that's about another reading project I'm working on. You probably already saw I have a Mount TBR juvenile fiction project that I'm working on. I'm going to be doing another juvenile reading project as well that relates to the here it is, I can just show you. I had as a goal to go ahead and read through the 1001 children's books you must read before you grow up, even though I'm already, grown up. So I'm going to have a video series on this as well. I'm going to keep it separate from my wrap-up videos. You'll notice I had no juvenile fiction in this wrap-up video, because I know that juvenile fiction's got kind of a narrower audience, so I'm going to separate it out, keep it easier that way. I think I'll do the same with book hauls going forward and so on. Have a juvenile fiction and then my YA adult classics all kind of together. So yeah, that's what's going on. So I will let you go, and I'll go back to reorganizing my laundry room, which is what I was doing before I popped in here. And now I can return my library books. Exciting stuff. Please comment below if you have any thoughts on the books. I love discussing books. And now I finally have notifications turned on correctly, so I won't miss your comment. So yay! So yeah. And please feel free to disagree with me. My feelings won't be hurt at all. At all. Yeah, see you next time.